speaking of U.S. lawmakers, they now want to build a cybersecurity army. The House passed a bill to recruit more cyber warriors and to start a new agency to deal with the growing alarm over the United States' vulnerability online. But it sparked concern that this may infringe on people's privacy. Radio host Alex Jones joins us live from Texas. He's one of these people who's concerned this will do more harm than good. Mr. Jones, thanks for joining us. Why are you concerned about this?
Well, I'm concerned because almost a year ago, Obama's new head of cybersecurity resigned. This is in the Washington Post, saying the Pentagon is taking the internet over. So they're telling the public it's to stop Chinese and Russian cyber attacks that are basically non-existent. That's just the cover. It's a false flag. The real architecture of this is the NSA and the Air Force are building more than a dozen centers around the country, one just a few miles from me here in Austin and San Antonio, that are spying on the American people with Google, that are tracking everything we're doing. The United Nations, that's controlled by the big central banks that run our nation, have called for a net ID or internet ID more draconian than Chinese net censorship. Australia, Italy have passed draconian internet laws that are more oppressive than even China. So what's happening is, and Cass Sunstein, the White House regulations czar, has written 2 white papers saying this, the system is discredited. The mainstream TV in our country, the mainstream newspapers are literally going bankrupt because no one believes them anymore about greenhouse gas, ClimateGate hoaxes, swine flu hoaxes, banker bailout hoaxes, the government health care hoaxes. The people are awake, and so Northcom and Homeland Security are mirroring what's happening in England, Australia, and Italy, and coming in with net surveillance and an attempt to set up INTERNET2 to restrict free speech. Time magazine is calling for restricting free speech right now. So the unthinkable is happening. The so-called Western democracies are falling into Hitlerian or almost Lenin-esque censorship and tyranny. It's really happening, but the genie is out of the bottle. The train has already left the station. The people are aware of the New World Order's criminal activities, their hoaxes, and it's not going to work. So cybersecurity, according to the former head of it, who valiantly resigned, is a Orwellian police state takeover of the internet, because the people are communicating with each other and exposing the corruption and saying no to the fraud. Our corrupt government is illegitimate and is aware that a peaceful renaissance, a revolution of awakening and understanding, similar to what happened in the lead up to 1776, is taking place. The American people are kicking out the oligarchs that other nations have kicked out in Africa, Latin America, and in Russia. We are not the slaves of a bunch of offshore banks, so they want to shut the web down, but it's too late for them.
Okay, but Mr. Jones, with respect, I mean, cybersecurity is clearly an issue. Identity theft is on the rise. It's huge. I mean, look what happened in Brazil, where the whole electric grid was shut down via the internet. The United States would be irresponsible to not be looking more into fighting cybersecurity or protecting cybersecurity, right?
We have had staged terror attack after staged terror attack. There have been many fake cybersecurity crises created. And bottom line, we have the former head of cybersecurity last year saying it's a takeover of the internet. We have the White House saying they may shut down the internet during emergencies. This is a pretext. This has nothing to do with true cybersecurity. This is censorship. This is control in the White House's own internal documents. So they use the excuse of outside threats as a way to come in and try to shut down the internet that our country created. And so, no, I don't agree with these fake, made-up crises. It's a complete fraud. Cybersecurity legislation, in the legislation, is a takeover of the internet by Homeland Security and the Pentagon. That is the basic facts. As Benjamin Franklin said, those that give up liberty for security deserve and get neither. And so this is crisis creation over and over again to take control of our society.
this pairing, the latest odd couple. Google is turning to the National Security Agency, who you heard Mr. Jones mention just a minute ago, to protect itself from hackers in the wake of a cyber attack it believes came from China. Now, the NSA conducts surveillance and code breaking for the federal government, but it also has a long history of spying. Here to talk about the pairing is historian Webster Tarpley. Webster, thanks for joining us. Now, this is kind of a turnaround for Google, who has really not been in cahoots with Washington before over surveillance. In fact, they've resisted them significantly. So what does this mean that they're, in essence, turning to the enemy for help?
Let me say, first of all, I think quite the contrary. They've always been intimately linked and may indeed have been founded by the U.S. intelligence community, as I'll try to show. Remember, now, this is the National Security Agency. It used to be the most secretive. This is cyber espionage, and their mission is quite simply to monitor everybody's electronic communications, everybody's SIG-INT, as they call it. So it's hard to imagine how they can object to somebody hacking when their mission is basically to hack the entire world.
Well, couldn't you argue they know it best, so they would be able to fight it best?
Well, this is, of course, a policy of confrontation with China, which is now opening up a cyber warfare theater, which I think is absolute folly. The news is that Google is now openly in alliance with the NSA in response to these attacks, which Google claims, and I stress that because there's no independent confirmation of any of this, Google claims that China hacked Google, and now they're joining with the NSA. What we learned from the Washington Post article of February 4th is it's not for the first time. We're told that over the past decade, not just Google, but Silicon Valley companies in general have been turning to the U.S. intelligence community, the NSA, for guidance and protection. And we're also told that it's not just the NSA, but the NSA is the lead agency of the entire U.S. intelligence community. So we've now got a cartel where Google joins with the NSA. It's a cartel sponsored by the CIA, the NSA, and they're going to essentially engage in cyber warfare with China. What they hope to gain from this, I do not know.
Okay, you mentioned these other Silicon Valley companies, but until now, Google has been one of the ones that has resisted pressure from Washington to turn over records, even taking them to court over the issue. So how can you just group Google with all of those other companies?
I'm afraid this is eyewash. This is essentially an attempt to create a cover story. It's true that Google claims that they did not cooperate with the terrorist surveillance project back in 2007, 2008. But let's just look at two important things. Who founded Google? How did Google get this tremendous supremacy starting in the late 90s? Well, it turns out that there's a CIA proprietary nonprofit company called In-Q-Tel. And In-Q-Tel, created back in 1999 or so under Norman Augustine, he's a famous industrial military complex entrepreneur. Their goal was to invest in the most advanced IT and cyber companies so that the U.S. intelligence community would always be at the forefront. Did they invest in Google? We know they did, at least at one point. CIA created Project Keyhole, the satellite imaging of the surface of the Earth. Project Keyhole was sold to Google, and it became Google Earth. And that's what you can see online. And this was a couple of $1 million of startup capital from In-Q-Tel. Now, the other aspect, does Google really object to censorship? Well, people in this country know they don't. Case in point, the famous FBI whistleblower, Sybil Edmonds, was about to testify in Congress. She had a story which was very damaging to the U.S. official account of 9/11. She happened to have her blog at Google Blog. Right before she was going to testify, Google blocked her blog. And she was not accused of anti-state activity or something like this, but of spamming. So she was found guilty of spamming, and they shut down her blog at a critical time. This is one of dozens of examples that we could cite of how the hypocrisy of Google can be shown through what they've actually done, as distinct from a couple of high-profile stunts that they've pulled in public to try to accredit themselves as being independent, and they're not. And now it's clear in public that they're not.
Well, Webster Tarpley, thank you so much for giving us this different point of view, trying to connect Google to the intelligence of the federal government long before this news that Google is officially working with the NSA.